Empress Xyra stood tall at the prow of her flagship, her body framed by the high, arched windows of the Dominion's grand observation deck. Through reinforced panels of translucent alloy, she beheld the blue sphere that was Earth. Only 2 days earlier, its atmosphere had gleamed with the brilliance of a free planet, unblemished by the vessels of the Xerath Dominion. But now, a foreboding ring of battlecruisers encircled it, each laden with the unstoppable force of the Empress's will. She inhaled, letting the faint metallic scent of the pressurized chamber fill her lungs. At 9 feet in height, with elongated limbs and regal posture, she was the embodiment of her species' grandeur, a living testament to the unchallenged might that had swept across entire star systems. Yet for all her poise, a subtle tension tugged at the corners of her sharp eyes. Something was different this time, and she was keenly aware of it. She turned from the window and gazed upon the bridge, an expanse of polished floors, consoles humming in precise unison, holographic displays flickering with tactical data. Though this invasion had proceeded smoothly, almost too smoothly, Xyra could not deny an undercurrent of uncertainty. Centuries ago, her forebears had warned that once the Dominion conquered too many worlds, they would risk fracturing from within. Ambition, rivalry, the thirst for power would seep through the ranks like a poison. The Empress felt no weakness in herself, but she recognized the cracks that might one day appear in her empire's foundation. For generations, the Xerath Dominion had expanded its borders, absorbing countless civilizations, harnessing their knowledge, yet always scorning their perceived frailty. Now, Earth, a planet rumored to harbor a rare resilience, lay before her, as if beckoning for a deeper confrontation, one that might test her carefully composed facade. Standing adjacent to her was General Xyra, a loyal subordinate whose decorative cuirass gleamed under the bright lights. His voice, crisp and confident, brought the latest reports. "Empress Xyra," he said, inclining his head in deference. "Resistance on the surface is rapidly dissolving. Our atmospheric hover fortresses have subdued the last bastions of human militaries. It will not be long before we control every major city. The humans have proven more stubborn than expected, but we have them cornered. Our sentry droids are making short work of any scattered groups that remain." She nodded, a slight flex of her elongated neck. "They are stubborn, yes, but they lack the technology to compete with our might. Still, their courage is intriguing," she murmured. Her voice resonated through the chamber with a low, almost musical timbre. "I want updates when you find those rumored enclaves that resisted with unorthodox tactics. They might carry knowledge we haven't yet collected." General Xyra hesitated. "Of course, Empress," he said. "The enclaves located near mountainous regions continue to hold out, employing guerrilla strategies. Rest assured, they will be apprehended soon." Xyra turned again to the window, arms folded behind her back. "Good," she replied. "We must dissect every strength they possess. If humans have any unusual resourcefulness, I intend to know its source." The planet loomed below, slowly turning. With a soft sigh, she recalled the earliest days of her ascension, when the Dominion had tested her readiness for the throne. She had proven her prowess on the frigid dunes of the planet Ithis, where howling winds punished any sign of hesitation. From that day forward, Xyra had never faltered, never questioned her destiny. Now, as she cast her gaze upon Earth, she felt a faint stirring, an unfamiliar sense that here was a species not easily broken. She wondered, would they break, or would they mold themselves into a new shape within the Dominion's grasp? Down on Earth's surface, Captain Elias Voss crouched behind the cracked remnants of a concrete barricade. His uniform, once neatly pressed, hung in torn tatters across his broad shoulders. Lines of exhaustion etched his face, and fine particles of debris clung to his dark hair. In front of him lay the ruins of what had been a major Earth city, reduced to a dismal sprawl of twisted steel and shattered glass. Overhead, the hum of alien hover fortresses vibrated in the air, an oppressive reminder of the unstoppable might descending upon his people. He clutched a small transmitter, fiddling with dials in a desperate attempt to contact anyone left in the chain of command. Static erupted across the channel, but a faint voice crackled through, calling out a code name. Elias recognized the voice. Colonel Mathers from the 17th Survival Unit. Relief washed over him like an unexpected gift. "Voss?" came the voice, distorted and weak. "Do you copy? We're pinned near the eastern sector." Elias pressed the transmitter close to his lips. "I hear you, Colonel. I've got my squad with me, but we're scattered. Any instructions?" "Regroup at the old industrial complex." The voice crackled. "We have minimal supplies, but we might set up a perimeter if we jam their sensors." "Hurry, Captain. We don't have long." Before Elias could answer, the signal cut out. He let out a frustrated sigh, pulling himself to his feet. Around him, a handful of fellow soldiers emerged from behind overturned vehicles and collapsed walls. Their eyes shone with the fire of determination, tempered by the heavy blow of repeated defeats. Ever since the Dominion's forces had descended, Earth's defenses had been systematically dismantled. Yet, among those few who remained, a spirit of defiance glimmered. Elias felt it resonate within his own chest, fueling his will to fight on. They moved swiftly through the wreckage, hearts pounding with each echo of alien machinery that reverberated through the smoke-choked air. The group pressed on, weaving through shadows, taking cover whenever they heard the distinct whir of Xerath sentry droids. These mechanical guardians stalked the shattered streets with menacing grace, four-legged contraptions of black metal, each equipped with plasma rifles that could incinerate a vehicle in moments. Despite the gravity of the situation, Elias felt an odd sense of clarity guiding his every step. He knew Earth's chance of triumph was negligible, almost non-existent. But raw chance alone had never been a reliable ally. The intangible factor, the one that had allowed humans to endure countless trials throughout their tumultuous history, was their capacity for adaptation. Against all odds, humans found ways to bend the impossible to their advantage, though the advantage here would be fleeting if it appeared at all. The group finally reached the industrial complex, a labyrinth of rusting storage tanks, defunct conveyor belts, and tall chimneys that stabbed toward the sky like skeletal fingers. The pungent odor of old chemicals still hung in the air. Colonel Mathers greeted them with a grim nod, directing them to a concealed bunker entrance beneath piles of scrap. Inside, a small congregation of civilian survivors clustered around battery-powered lanterns, their expressions etched with fear and hope in equal measure. "Captain," the colonel said quietly, guiding him to a makeshift command station lit by a single, flickering bulb. "We've managed to capture some Dominion weaponry. Our techs are trying to figure them out. Maybe we can replicate their systems enough to buy us time." Elias's eyes narrowed. "Time for what?" Colonel Mathers exhaled, a breath laden with resignation. "For a miracle, I suppose. Our transmissions to allied governments are nearly non-existent. Some pockets of resistance remain, but they can't hold out much longer. I've heard rumors that the Xyra Dominion's Empress is here personally. If that's true, it either means they respect our strength, or they consider us an amusement." Elias nodded. "If she's here, maybe we can force a confrontation, draw her away from the rest of their fleet, or negotiate terms. Something. We can't continue like this forever." A heavy silence passed between them before he added, "Let's see what we can do about those alien weapons." With that, the two men parted ways, each carrying the weight of humanity's last stand on his shoulders. Yet Elias harbored a sliver of defiance, a flicker of possibility. He hadn't fought this far just to lay down arms without a final act of resistance. One way or another, the Dominion would learn that humans possessed a depth of spirit not easily measured or consumed. High above in her flagship, Empress Xyra studied the holographic map of Earth's surface. Blinking lights denoted pockets of remaining resistance, scattered like faint stars in a decaying sky. General Theros approached, his voice unusually tense. "We've discovered a human cell at an industrial complex. They've salvaged some of our weaponry, and they appear to be tampering with it." Xyra raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. They're more resourceful than I anticipated. Send an elite retrieval squad immediately. I want at least one of them taken alive for interrogation, a soldier if possible. I suspect they might have valuable insight." Theros inclined his head. "It shall be done." Within the hour, Dominion assault crafts descended, their energy shields cutting through the night sky like comets of shimmering plasma. Sentry droids and heavily armed troopers poured into the industrial complex, moving with calculated precision. Alarms rang through the corridors of the makeshift bunker, and the panicked cries of civilians echoed off concrete walls. Elias, bracing for the inevitable, quickly grabbed an alien rifle that his fellow survivors had managed to rewire, an unwieldy device with controls not designed for human hands. Still, he forced his grip around its handle, feeling a surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. A barrage of blue-white energy pulses lit the dim passages, illuminating fearful faces, glinting off metal railings. Colonel Mathers fired valiantly before being struck by a bolt that sent him sprawling. Elias shouted, raising the alien rifle, returning fire with a beam that momentarily stalled the advance of the Dominion troopers. A second barrage came from the left flank, and an explosion rocked the bunker. Smoke choked the narrow halls. Soldiers stumbled and coughed, ears ringing with the concussive blast. Elias led a desperate push, attempting to shepherd civilians toward a back exit. But the Dominion had already sealed off the escape routes. The tall, imposing silhouettes of the alien troopers closed in. Their exoskeletal armor, shining with an otherworldly sheen, emitted an unsettling hum. One trooper lunged forward, a metallic limb lashing out, striking Elias across the chest and knocking him flat. Pain sliced through his ribs, and his vision blurred. With his last conscious effort, he raised the rifle again and fired blindly, uncertain if he struck anything. Darkness crowded his peripheral vision. A boot, perhaps it was more accurate to call it a plated extremity, pressed down on his arm, forcing him to drop the rifle. Then everything went black, the chaos of battle fading into an echo in the recesses of his mind. When he awakened, he found himself bound in strange restraints aboard a dimly lit chamber. The walls pulsed with quiet energy, glowing lines that pulsed in an alien rhythm. Everything had the subtle resonance of a moving vessel. He was on a Dominion ship, perhaps even the Empress's flagship. He tested the restraints, finding them unyielding. As his eyes adjusted to the low light, he noticed a figure standing near the far wall, observing him in silence. It was her. Even in partial darkness, Empress Xyra was a commanding presence. 9 feet of elegant, lethal grace, draped in a regal garment that shimmered with shifting colors. Her features, though humanoid in structure, bore striking differences. Her skin carried a hint of opalescent texture, her eyes were large and angled, glowing faintly in the subdued light, and her hair, an intricate arrangement of dark, glossy strands, framed a face that was as proud as it was enigmatic. Elias felt a jolt in his core, an instinctive blend of apprehension and a strange, curious awe. "Captain Elias Voss," Xyra said, her voice carrying a lilting resonance. "I have read your identification from the data files, and I witnessed your efforts in that industrial complex. You fought bravely." A bitter taste filled Elias's mouth. "If you're expecting me to beg for mercy, you'll be disappointed." She stepped forward, each stride imbued with an alien grace that made her seem almost weightless. "It amuses me how humans value defiance. I've conquered worlds far mightier than yours. Yet, here you are, unbroken by the futility of your situation." Her lips formed a slight smile, though her gaze remained analytical. "I am curious about you, Captain. You were singled out for capture because you displayed leadership, adaptability, a certain quality I've not often seen in conquered species." Despite the pain in his ribs, Elias straightened his spine as much as the restraints allowed. "We're not just another species for you to catalog and subjugate. We won't lie down and accept enslavement." A soft chuckle escaped her. Bold words, and so typically human. She leaned in slightly, her towering height dwarfing him. "Your bodies are fragile compared to ours, your technology behind by centuries, but you persist." "What?" He leveled his gaze at her. "Because we have hope, and we have something to protect." For a fraction of a moment, something unidentifiable flickered across Xyra's eyes, perhaps curiosity or the faintest whisper of introspection. Then she turned away. "General Theros wants you sent to a standard interrogation cell, but I have decided otherwise. You shall remain here, where I will personally study you. You may yet serve a greater purpose." Before Elias could respond, Xyra pressed a panel on the wall, and a soft hiss filled the chamber as a mild sedative pumped through the air vents. Darkness swelled at the edges of his vision once again, and he struggled to keep his eyes open. The last thing he saw was the Empress, standing with regal composure, her face inscrutable, watching him slip into unconsciousness. In the days that followed, Elias found himself subjected to a series of examinations, some medical, others more psychological in nature. Empress Xyra would observe from an elevated platform as Dominion scientists, clad in sterile robes, prodded him with scanning devices, injected him with luminous serums that made his veins glow beneath his skin, and asked countless questions about human physiology, culture, and emotional drives. Each day, Elias would be returned to a private cell that was surprisingly comfortable. It boasted a sleep platform, climate control, and a glass partition that offered a view of distant stars. At first, these protocols were cold and clinical, reinforcing his impression that he was nothing more than a curious specimen. But gradually, the tone of his captivity began to shift. Xyra herself started to conduct interviews, posing questions about Earth's history, about legendary human figures who fought impossible odds. Initially, Elias responded with defiance, offering only brief, guarded remarks. Yet something about Xyra's manner of inquiry, her quiet fascination, began to wear down his hostility. On more than one occasion, he found himself recounting Earth's mythic tales of heroes and underdogs, noticing a spark in her eyes that seemed to waver between skepticism and wonder. For Xyra, these daily encounters became a chance to probe not just human physiology, but the essence of humanity's emotional core. She began each session by detailing a subject of interest, such as the concept of love, sacrifice, or the longing for freedom, and then asking Elias how humans interpreted such ideas. She was especially perplexed by the notion that humans would risk their own survival for intangible beliefs. In the Dominion's hierarchical culture, personal ambition often outweighed altruism, but humans, it seemed, could unite under shared ideals, forging alliances even in the face of certain defeat. One day, after a session that veered into unexpected territory, Xyra lingered in the laboratory, her eyes studying Elias's form through a glass barrier. A pang of something new flickered across her chest. She had always considered the lesser species to be, well, lesser. Yet Captain Voss defied that notion. Even in captivity, he displayed a silent dignity that intrigued her, a quality that made her question her own prejudices. She tried to dismiss these stirrings as mere intellectual curiosity, but they persisted, tapping gently at her centuries-old certainties. That same night, she found her steps leading her to the corridor outside Elias's private cell. She hesitated there, uncertain why she had come. Perhaps it was to check on his condition, or to glean more insights from a being so vastly different from herself. Pressing her palm against the scanner, she allowed the door to slide open. Inside, Elias sat on the edge of his sleep platform, gazing at the view of the stars with a forlorn expression. Hearing the door, he rose to his feet, squaring his shoulders, a faint wariness in his posture. "You seem troubled," she observed, her voice softer than usual. He shrugged, a weary smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I'm a captive on an alien warship, far from home, with my planet under enemy occupation. I'd say that qualifies as troubled." She stepped further into the room, every inch the imposing Empress, but with a subtle gentleness in her tone. "And yet, you endure. Do you never tire of resisting?" His gaze flickered with a trace of defiance. "Tiring isn't the point. If we give up, we lose more than just a battle. We lose ourselves." A contemplative hush settled over them. Slowly, Xyra lowered herself to a sitting position, though even seated she loomed above him. "In the Dominion," she began, "strength is revered. Weakness is scorned. We expand and conquer because we believe it is our right, our destiny. I was taught from birth that this is not just policy, but the natural order of the galaxy." Elias's eyes held hers. "And do you still believe that?" Her expression flickered with the faintest shadow of doubt. "I question it, in ways I never did before. Your people, in their weakness, have shown a resilience I did not expect. Some might call that strength. Perhaps there's more to conquest than simply seizing power." In that moment, an unspoken connection formed between them, fragile yet undeniable. Though they existed on opposite ends of an immense power dynamic, Empress and captive, they found themselves sharing a rare honesty. For a long time, neither spoke. They merely looked at each other, each weighed down by the complexities of their circumstances. Then, with a slight incline of her head, Xyra rose. Rest, Captain. I will have more questions tomorrow. He watched her exit, a swirl of conflicting emotions flooding his heart. Curiosity, admiration, resentment, and a peculiar stirring he dared not name. Weeks passed, and the dynamic between them evolved in subtle increments. The scientific examinations continued, but Xyra began to spare Elias from the more invasive tests, to the puzzlement of her subordinates. She claimed her interest lay in studying him holistically, including his psychological makeup, thus justifying fewer injections and less physical probing. Increasingly, their interactions took the form of philosophical dialogues, in which Xyra seemed eager to comprehend the moral framework of humans. Elias, for his part, tried to glean any insight into Dominion society, hoping he might someday turn that knowledge to Earth's advantage. During one such conversation, as they sat in a specially modified chamber designed to accommodate Xyra's towering stature yet remain comfortable for Elias, a distress call resonated through the warship's communication systems. It was from a Dominion outpost in the Polaris sector, requesting urgent reinforcements due to a rebellious uprising. Xyra's visage turned grim. She excused herself, leaving Elias in the custody of a pair of sentry droids. Something about her abrupt departure stirred a sense of concern within him, though he would never admit it aloud. He paced his cell, troubled by the conflicting impulses inside him. Xyra was his captor, but she was also something else. Their conversations had been genuine. He knew that. And while he still despised the Dominion for ravaging his planet, he found himself unable to dismiss Xyra as a heartless tyrant. She was governed by the code of her civilization, raised to believe in her inherent superiority. How much of that was truly her choice? Meanwhile, unrest brewed within the Dominion ranks. Whispers spread that the Empress had grown uncharacteristically lenient toward a human captive, and certain generals, thirsting for power and strict adherence to tradition, began to question her judgment. Chief among the dissenters was General Theros, who had long harbored ambitions beyond his post. The notion that Xyra might be losing her edge, that she might even be succumbing to sentimentality, festered in his mind like a rotting wound. One night, Xyra summoned Elias to her private quarters, an unprecedented step, given the strict protocols surrounding an Empress's personal domain. Flanked by silent guards, he entered cautiously, uncertain of what to expect. Her living space was vast yet austere, filled with exotic artifacts from conquered worlds. There were shimmering tapestries woven from the silk of a desert planet, crystalline sculptures humming with internal luminescence, and a circular viewing port that offered a breathtaking panorama of passing stars. Xyra stood near this port, her back turned, arms clasped behind her. After a tense pause, she spoke. "Captain Voss," she began, her voice tinged with an uncharacteristic tenderness. "You have never asked me about my past, my ascent to the throne. Why is that?" Elias regarded her for a moment. "I assumed it wouldn't make a difference. You're the Empress. What does your past matter when your present power is absolute?" She turned, a melancholic curve to her lips. "Absolute power is an illusion," she said softly. "I was groomed to lead, to expand our borders, to uphold our traditions. My victory over rival heirs secured my throne, but it also bound me to the Dominion's ambitions. Lately, I've begun to wonder if this endless conquest is truly the answer." Elias studied her expression, reading the genuine conflict in her eyes. "What changed?" She hesitated, as if carefully choosing her words. "You did," she finally admitted. "Your defiance, your unwavering commitment to values that seem, to us, illogical, hope, compassion, self-sacrifice. It's strange, and it has made me question certain truths." A tension hung in the air, thick with possibility. Elias stepped closer, feeling both vulnerable and emboldened. "Xyra," he said, employing her name without title. "If you're truly questioning your empire's methods, then end this. Let Earth go." A sad smile touched her face. "If only it were so simple. If I ceased the conquest, the Dominion might fracture. My generals would sense weakness and overthrow me. A chaotic civil war could ravage countless systems. And Earth, your people, would inevitably be caught in the crossfire." Elias sighed. "So you do nothing, and Earth remains under occupation. That's hardly a solution." She reached out, her elongated fingers brushing against his cheek. Despite himself, Elias did not pull away. There was a trembling in her touch, a quiet yearning. "You are correct," she murmured. "We stand at the precipice of something unimaginable. I do not know if I have the strength to cross it." In that moment, the tension that had simmered between them flared into something unmistakably intimate. Her towering form bent toward him, and he found himself drawn closer, a swirl of emotions threatening to unravel his rational defenses. Their lips met, tentative at first, then more certain, as if bridging the chasm of species, culture, and power that separated them. The kiss lasted but a heartbeat, yet in that heartbeat, everything changed. When they pulled apart, both seemed dazed. Elias's heart pounded as he whispered, What are we doing?" A flicker of sorrow and resolve played across Xyra's features. "I am not certain," she confessed, stepping back. "But I feel a connection I cannot ignore." In the ensuing days, an impossible romance bloomed behind closed doors, guarded by silence and caution. Each stolen moment carried the risk of discovery. Yet for Xyra, these moments were a breath of liberation from the suffocating expectations of her station. For Elias, they were a dangerous interplay of desire and loyalty to his people. A swirling conflict roiled within him. How could he justify such intimacy with the very ruler who oversaw Earth's oppression? Meanwhile, rumors swirled among the Dominion elite. Whispers of the Empress's altered demeanor, her private visits to the human cell, and her growing reluctance to unleash full destructive force on the remaining Earth resistance reached the ears of General Xyra. Eager to exploit any perceived vulnerability, he began covertly assembling loyalists, feeding them a narrative of betrayal, that the Empress had grown soft and threatened the Dominion's legacy. Xyra was not entirely blind to these machinations, but her thoughts were increasingly dominated by the disquiet within her. One afternoon, after a lengthy diplomatic meeting with high-ranking Dominion officials who demanded harsher measures to squash persistent Earth rebellions, Xyra felt an unsettling nausea roil in her gut. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, disoriented by a wave of dizziness. At first, she dismissed it as exhaustion, the consequence of her growing internal turmoil. But the sensation persisted, intensifying over subsequent days. Concerned, she confided in the chief scientist, Dr. Xyra, a stoic figure who had overseen many of Elias's examinations. After thorough tests, Xyrash's features turned uncommonly tense. "Empress," he said quietly, "the results are unprecedented." Xyra's heart hammered. "Explain." Xyra swallowed hard, his voice quavering with disbelief. "You are carrying a developing life form within you, a child. The genetic signatures indicate it is a hybrid, part Xerath, part human." Time seemed to freeze as Xyra's breath caught in her throat. She steadied herself against a table. The improbable had happened. Her clandestine encounters with Elias had not merely been an emotional or physical affair. They had spawned a new life. Dr. Xyra continued in a hushed tone. "I have never encountered such a thing. Our species has never successfully interbred with any other. The improbability, it defies all previous scientific understanding." Xyra's thoughts whirled, colliding with one another. What would this mean for her reign, for Elias, for Earth? How would the Dominion react to a half-human heir? Fear, awe, and a strange thread of hope mingled in her chest. She dismissed Xyra with strict orders to keep the revelation secret, fully aware that if news reached General Xyra or other rival factions, the repercussions would be catastrophic. That night, she summoned Elias to a hidden alcove within the ship's vast botanical observatory, a quiet sanctuary where alien flora thrived under artificial starlight. The air was thick with the sweet aroma of vibrant, bioluminescent flowers. Standing amid the ghostly glow, Elias immediately sensed her distress. "What's wrong?" he asked, stepping closer, his eyes full of concern. She drew a shaky breath. "Elias, I am carrying our child." His face went pale. At first, he appeared incredulous. Then his features morphed into astonishment, and finally a muted sense of wonder. How is that even possible?" he asked, voice trembling. She shook her head, tears gathering at the corners of her luminous eyes. "I don't know. Dr. Xyra can't explain it. But it is happening, and the implications are enormous." Elias reached out, gently taking her hand. "Do they know? Will they?" She cut him off, voice tight with urgency. No one knows except Zeresh and me. But secrets do not remain hidden for long in the Dominion. The moment Theros hears of this, we will face a crisis. Some might see this as an abomination, others as a threat. It could spark civil war or a coup. A swell of protectiveness rose in Elias's chest, a fierce determination he had never felt so acutely. We won't let that happen. Tears glistened on her cheeks, reflecting the soft glow of alien petals. She embraced him, her tall frame enveloping his. Elias, I had planned to find a way to negotiate for Earth's partial autonomy, to seek a compromise. But with this child on the horizon, the stakes have changed. We must be cautious, yet decisive. Our child's fate, and possibly the fate of our civilizations, hangs in the balance. Their embrace lingered, a fragile moment of unity amid the roiling storm of cosmic politics. Neither knew how the days ahead would unfold, but they felt a profound bond that transcended fear. Rumors of the Empress's unusual behavior reached a crescendo. Word spread that she seemed physically unwell at times, and that her private interactions with the human captive were uncomfortably frequent. Whispers of a forbidden union circled among the Dominion's elite. Though no concrete proof existed, General Theros and his allies seized upon the disquiet. They clandestinely gathered an armada of loyal warships, preparing to challenge the Empress's authority if any revelation confirmed their suspicions. One fateful day, Dr. Zeresh was cornered by Theros's enforcers, who coerced him into revealing the truth. Horrified by his betrayal, Zeresh was forced to confess the existence of the hybrid child. Triumph flashed in Theros's eyes. At last, he had the weapon he needed to delegitimize Xyra, to cast her as a compromised ruler who would taint the Dominion's purity. Armed with this explosive secret, Theros made his move. He stormed the Grand Assembly Hall with a retinue of heavily armed soldiers. The hall itself was massive, filled with towering pillars inscribed with the Dominion's conquests. At the far end, seated upon a throne raised on a dais, was Empress Xyra, her posture regal yet weighed by an invisible burden. As Theros's troops encircled the space, the courtiers and officials present recoiled in shock and fear. Empress Xyra, Theros declared, his voice reverberating through the chamber. You stand accused of fraternizing with a human captive, an act of treason against the very fabric of our civilization. Worse, you carry within you a half-human spawn. This abomination cannot be allowed to stand. A tense hush fell. Xyra rose from her throne, her gaze cold, unwavering. But inside, her emotions churned. General Theros, she said icily, you dare accuse the Empress without trial or evidence? Theros laughed, a sinister edge to his tone. We have testimony. Dr. Zeresh, come forward. The trembling scientist reluctantly stepped forth, eyes downcast. Theros continued. He has confirmed your pregnancy and its hybrid nature. Your disregard for Dominion law is laid bare. I charge you with undermining the purity of our lineage, endangering the Empire, and conspiring with an enemy soldier. An uproar ensued among the assembly, some gasping in shock, others exchanging guarded glances. Many had suspected something was amiss, but this revelation shook the foundations of their beliefs. Xyra stood tall, though she fought a wave of nausea. Our conquest was built on the premise that other species were inferior, she declared, voice echoing in the Grand Hall. But have we not learned anything from our expansions? The humans demonstrate qualities we should value: resilience, courage, moral conviction. We have grown stagnant, clinging to outdated notions of superiority. Theros's face twisted in contempt. Your words reek of heresy. Surrender your throne and submit yourself for judgment, or be removed by force. An intense stillness settled over the chamber. Many of the Empress's guards appeared conflicted, unsure whom to obey. Finally, Xyra spoke. I will not surrender. If you challenge me, General, prepare to face the consequences. She exhaled, steadying herself, aware that violence was inevitable. In a flash, Theros signaled his loyalists, and chaos erupted. Weapons discharged, bright beams of energy slicing through the Grand Hall. Courtiers scrambled for cover behind pillars. Xyra's personal guard rushed to her defense. Tactically, Theros had the advantage of surprise and numbers. But Xyra possessed an imposing presence and unwavering loyalty from her elite guard. The clash was brutal. At the height of the skirmish, Elias burst into the assembly hall, having escaped his cell with help from a sympathetic guard. Upon seeing the Empress besieged, he did not hesitate. Seizing a fallen Dominion rifle, he fired at Theros's flank, disorienting the mutineers' soldiers and allowing Xyra's loyalists to regroup. A flurry of sparks ignited as beams of energy collided with ornate metal columns. The air filled with the acrid stench of ionized plasma. In the swirling confusion, Xyra confronted the roast directly, her height and training granting her a fearsome advantage. Yet the roast was also a formidable warrior. He managed to wound Xyra's arm with a blade of crackling energy, drawing an otherworldly blue blood. She staggered, a hiss of pain escaping her lips. Adrenaline surged through Elias as he saw her falter. He threw himself into the fray, grappling with the roast, trying to wrest the weapon from his grasp. The roast, with a snarl of disdain, lashed out, sending Elias tumbling. But the momentary distraction was enough. Xyra launched a strike from behind, channeling the last of her strength. The blade she wielded connected with Theros's back, piercing his armor. A roar of agony tore from his throat, and he dropped to his knees, the rebellious fire in his eyes flickering out. Seeing their leader fall, Theros's loyalists faltered. Dominion soldiers loyal to Xyra seized control, disarming the mutineers. The battle, though fierce, was short-lived. Smoke and echoes of pain lingered as the Empress stood victorious, albeit wounded, over Theros's prone form. As medics rushed to tend to the injured, Elias made his way to Xyra's side. She swayed, gripping a pillar for support, one hand pressed to her wound. Their eyes met, relief tempered by the weight of the ordeal. "You came," she whispered, voice trembling. He nodded, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "I wouldn't let you face them alone." News of the failed coup spread quickly. Some factions continued to whisper dissent, but the majority recognized that Theros's brazen attempt had been a betrayal of the Dominion's established order. After a swift tribunal, the ringleaders were tried for insurrection. Meanwhile, rumors of the Empress's hybrid child reached every corner of the vast empire, causing shockwaves of debate. Some labeled it an atrocity, others viewed it with wary curiosity. Still, enough recognized that Xyra's leadership remained strong, and that outright rebellion would be crushed. For the moment, a tenuous stability returned. Unwilling to see the Dominion descend into further chaos, Xyra addressed her people through a galaxy-wide broadcast. She stood in the same grand hall where battle had raged mere days before, the damage hastily repaired, her posture regal despite the bandaged wound on her arm. Beside her, in a bold gesture, stood Captain Elias Voss. Together, they presented a unified front. The Empress spoke of evolution, growth, and unity, of how the Dominion's survival would rely on embracing new possibilities, not merely subjugating them. She declared the human hybrid child a symbol of a future that wove together different strengths into a more resilient tapestry. Opinions across the empire remained divided, but the speech planted seeds of a radical paradigm shift. Conquered worlds, once relegated to submission and resource extraction, began whispering of the new Empress, one who dared to speak of cooperation, albeit cautiously. Earth, though still under Dominion oversight, found the noose of occupation loosening. Human leaders were invited to diplomatic forums, and collaborations aimed at rebuilding war-torn cities emerged. For Elias, it was both heartening and surreal. He was permitted to visit Earth, to see how reconstruction efforts were shaping up. Ruined streets slowly filled with the hum of new technology, some Dominion, some human. Families ventured out of hiding, children peering curiously at the imposing frames of Xerath soldiers who now patrolled more peacefully. Skepticism abounded, but so did hope. Meanwhile, Xyra's pregnancy advanced, bringing her unusual sensations and vulnerabilities. She navigated this transformative period with a resolve that astonished even the most skeptical Dominion officials. A private medical team, led by Dr. Zeresh, who had reaffirmed his loyalty, monitored her meticulously, anticipating the complexities of a hybrid birth. Internally, she wrestled with doubt. Could she truly lead an empire locked in a centuries-long cycle of conquest toward a future of unity? Could she and Elias, so fundamentally different, stand together as parents to a new generation? In the final weeks before the expected birth, an intensifying wave of unrest swept through Dominion border territories. Some admirals refused to acknowledge her new policies, launching independent raids on fringe planets. Fearful of appearing weak, Xyra deployed loyal forces to quell these breakaway actions. Yet she also sent envoys to negotiate peaceful resolutions wherever possible. Step by step, she chipped away at the old ways of relentless conquest, forging a fragile new path that teetered on the edge of revolt at any given moment. At last, the time came. In the high-tech medical suite of the flagship, attended by both Xerath and human physicians, Empress Xyra went into labor. Elias was at her side, his hand clasping hers, offering what comfort he could. The process was anything but simple. The child's genetic makeup strained the expectations of Xerath biology. Hours turned into a day, during which the Empress's formidable strength ebbed, replaced by labored breaths and trembling limbs. Medical machines buzzed frantically, readouts spiking with cryptic data. Finally, after countless tense moments, the child's first cry echoed through the chamber, a sound that pierced the hush like a note of hope. The infant, wrapped in a sterile cloth, was presented to Xyra. Astonishment flooded the room. The child's skin bore a faint opalescent sheen reminiscent of Xyra's, yet the face and overall proportions were startlingly human. Tiny eyes blinked up at the two parents, as if uncertain of the new world. Tears welled in Xyra's eyes, and Elias felt an overwhelming surge of protectiveness. They were gazing upon a living bond between two species that had once been locked in mortal enmity. "She is beautiful," Xyra whispered, voice cracking under emotion. Elias, too choked with wonder to speak, nodded, touching the child's delicate hand. In that gesture lay an entire universe of possibility. The birth of the hybrid child reverberated across the Dominion. For some, it was heresy incarnate. For others, a sign of progress. Yet few could deny that a threshold had been crossed. Xyra, now more resolute than ever, leveraged the symbolism of her newborn daughter, named Sarai, a blend of a human name and a Xerath linguistic root denoting dawn, to rally support for a reimagined empire. She declared an official end to the outright subjugation of Earth, replacing it with a structured alliance that recognized human autonomy. The path ahead would be complicated, rife with negotiation and compromise, but it marked a seismic shift in Dominion policy. Reconstruction on Earth accelerated. Dominion soldiers collaborated with human engineers, sharing advanced manufacturing techniques to rebuild infrastructure. In return, humans offered their expertise in domains Dominion had overlooked, fields of medicine, philosophy, and environmental stewardship. The scars of war remained, but a cautious optimism bloomed. Over time, children in Earth streets no longer flinched at the sight of towering Xerath troopers, and humans found themselves invited to explore broader opportunities, including positions within the Dominion's evolving administrative framework. Within the Dominion's inner circles, an uneasy détente formed. Rival generals recognized that attempting another coup risked uniting a newly collaborative Earth-Dominion alliance against them. Pragmatic considerations overrode zealotry. While some pockets of unrest lingered, Xyra's leadership, bolstered by the tangible proof of her new family, held the empire together through this tumultuous transition. Elias, no longer simply a captain from a fallen planet, found himself a bridge between two worlds. He served as an ambassador, forging diplomatic ties and fostering cultural exchanges. Despite the overwhelming complexities, he discovered purpose in building something new, in standing beside Xyra as a partner, both politically and personally. Their relationship, forged in a crucible of war, evolved into a genuine bond, neither fully understood by either species yet anchored by mutual trust and the love they felt for Sarai. For the hybrid child herself, the galaxy appeared as an open horizon of wonders. As she grew, Sarai manifested traits from both lineages, keen intelligence and an emotional empathy characteristic of humans, coupled with the regal bearing and heightened physical capabilities of the Xerath. She became a living emblem of what unity could achieve. Some even whispered that, when the day came for her to ascend, she might lead the Dominion to a golden age of cooperation, weaving together the best qualities of each race. In the midst of these grand visions for the future, everyday life found a new rhythm. Xyra and Elias, though still burdened with political responsibilities and lingering tensions, found moments of ordinary happiness, strolling through Earth's revitalized parks, where nature and alien technology coexisted in surprising harmony, celebrating cultural festivals that blended human traditions with Xyra's ceremonial rites, tucking Sarai into a cradle that bore the insignia of both Earth and the Dominion. Step by step, the scars of conquest began to heal, replaced by the cautious hope of shared destiny. A happy resolution. A decade passed, ushering in a transformed galactic landscape. The Dominion retained its formidable reach, but it no longer pursued blind expansion. Instead, it evolved into a coalition of diverse worlds, each with its own strengths, united under a charter that balanced mutual respect with centralized governance. Earth, free from the chains of total subjugation, stood as a key member of this coalition, its resilience and cultural richness celebrated as examples for all. Empress Xyra reigned with wisdom tempered by experience, her rule supported by loyalists who had once doubted her but now appreciated her balanced vision. General Tharas's attempted coup remained a cautionary tale, etched in the annals of Dominion history as a pivotal moment that almost derailed a profound transformation. In the end, that day of violence had served as the crucible for a new era, one where the Dominion discovered strength not in uniformity, but in unity. Captain Elias Voss, though seldom called by his military rank anymore, was widely regarded as the first ambassador from humanity to serve at Xyra's side. His presence in the Empress's court underscored the alliance between Earth and the Dominion. Together, they navigated interstellar diplomacy, quelling disputes with negotiation rather than domination, encouraging an approach that honored the dignity of all sapient life. And then there was Sarai, the half-human heir whose genetic lineage had been deemed impossible. As she grew, her inquisitive spirit and innate sense of empathy captured the hearts of those who met her. She traveled between Earth and distant Dominion worlds, forming a living bridge that dissolved cultural barriers. She spoke fluent Xyra, as well as multiple Earth languages, eagerly learning local customs and legends wherever she went. By her 15th birthday, her potential as a leader, and more importantly, as a unifier, was apparent to everyone. On one particularly radiant afternoon, as Earth's sun shone over a crystal amphitheater built to commemorate the new alliance, a great assembly gathered. Delegations from across the Dominion arrived in sleek vessels, each adorned with the colors and emblems of its home world. Humans in formal attire mingled with towering Xyra, as well as delegates from other species once conquered, now recognized as equal partners in the forging of a new destiny. Empress Xyra, regal and resolute, stood beside Elias on a raised platform. Their daughter, now a vibrant young woman with opalescent flecks in her eyes, approached the podium to address the crowd. The amphitheater fell silent, and her voice carried with clarity. "My people, humans, Xyra, and all others, we gather today to celebrate how far we have come. Once, our histories were marked by violence and mistrust. But now, we stand as a coalition dedicated to collaboration. My existence is proof that what divides us can also unite us in unexpected ways. Each world, each culture, enriches the mosaic of our shared galaxy. The future belongs to those who dare to hope for more than conflict, who strive for understanding and unity." Thunderous applause rose like a wave, echoing off the translucent walls. Tears glimmered in the eyes of onlookers, human tears and the Xyra equivalent, luminescent drops that reflected the combined hopes of countless beings. Empress Xyra and Elias watched proudly as their daughter spoke with conviction that surpassed either of their wildest dreams. In Sarai's words, the entire galaxy glimpsed a future once deemed impossible, now blossoming into reality. As the celebration continued long into the evening, laughter and music filled the amphitheater. Humans and Xyra danced in what had become a shared tradition, an artful interplay of movements adapted from both species' cultural expressions. The skies above glowed with ceremonial lights from orbiting ships. A new day had dawned, a day unburdened by the chains of subjugation. Amid the festivities, Xyra and Elias slipped away to a quiet balcony overlooking a serene lake. Lights danced upon the water, reflecting the joy that pervaded the gathering. They exchanged a tender smile, each recalling the unimaginable journey that had led them here, from captive and conqueror to allies, then to lovers, parents, and ultimately partners in governance. Elias gently took Xyra's hand. "Did you ever imagine," he said softly, "that we'd come this far?" Xyra's lips curved into a gracious smile, her opalescent eyes glimmering with gratitude. "Not in my wildest dreams, Captain Voss," she replied, reverting affectionately to his old title. "But I have learned that the unknown holds more possibilities than even an empress can foresee." Their child's laughter carried across the lake, weaving into the lilting chorus of celebration behind them. For a moment, they simply breathed in the peaceful night air, content in the knowledge that hope had prevailed. Their improbable love had forged a bond strong enough to reshape an empire, and, in doing so, grant Earth and the Dominion a shared future. The two leaned against each other, gazing up at the stars that now belonged to all. In that silent communion, they found reassurance that no matter the trials still to come, they had laid the foundation for a brighter destiny, one in which differences became strengths rather than divisions. And so, as the shimmering lights of the galaxy embraced them, they let their hearts settle into the warmth of a truly happy ending.